Hey everyone, it's Discordian Kitty. In World of Warcraft's new patch, Legacy of Arathor, Faerin Lothar is visiting the Arathi Highlands of all places. And while Lore Walker Cho has also arrived this week to do a great job catching us up with the history of Xal'atath, the history of the Ethereals, and for some reason the history of Arthas, he doesn't go into the history of the Arathi, or Faerin, or Danath and Marin Trollbane, or anything like that. So I'm here to help refresh your memory on the lore you totally knew already, you just forgot about it for a minute, that should prove useful when it comes to understanding World of Warcraft's current story as it's playing out right now. First things first, understanding the difference between the Arathi we already knew, the Arathi we met in Hallowfall, the Arathi Empire, and the Empire of Arathor. Because while they are all related, they are not all the same thing. And I've seen quite a bit of confusion about this, which is pretty understandable. As far as we know, the Empire of Arathor was the very first human empire in Azeroth. Long ago, a tribe of humans known as the Arathi tribe united the other tribes of the Eastern Kingdoms under the leadership of a warlord named Thoradin. The formation of this empire was heavily motivated by conflict with the Trolls, and during the Troll Wars, the humans of Arathor formed an alliance with the High Elves of Quel'Thalas. It was this alliance that introduced magic to the humans, as one of the terms was that 100 humans from Arathor would be taught arcane magic by the elves. For the most part, the Empire of Arathor is considered long since gone. All that remains is Stromgarde, located in the Arathi Highlands. Stromgarde was once the capital of the Empire of Arathor. Back then, it was called Strom. And you might remember from my video about the Darkmoon Fair, a ghost who haunts Darkmoon Island claiming Silas Darkmoon originally rescued him from his family in Strom has caused speculation that Silas is thousands of years old, because Stromgarde hasn't been called Strom for thousands of years. Nor has it been considered the capital of an empire, as the Empire of Arathor was split into the 7 human kingdoms of Alterac, Dalaran, Gilneas, Kulturas, Lordaeron, Stormwind, and Stromgarde. In ancient times, presumably sometime after the Troll Wars, but before or around the same time as the Empire split, a group of Arathi humans and Quel'Thalas elves left the Eastern Kingdoms and sailed west, across the Storming Sea to an unknown land beyond, where they settled and established a new Arathi Empire. By all accounts, that empire remains mighty to this day, though we have never seen or visited it, as it lies beyond the Storming Sea, which we've never traveled across. We've traveled to other planets and other realities. We have spaceships and all sorts of portals that allow us to do that, but for some reason we can't or won't visit the other side of Azeroth. Yeah, it's a bit odd, try not to let it bother you. A little over a decade ago, the current emperor of the Arathi Empire sent an expedition of Arathi back across the Storming Sea in response to a vision he had of a radiant light and the final battle between the light and the shadow. This expedition was nearly destroyed in a storm, but in a flash of light they were transported to Hallowfall. Believing that Beledar, the crystal that lights up the zone, was the light from the Emperor's vision, the Arathi of Hallowfall settled in the area and have remained there ever since, awaiting this final battle. So to reiterate, the Empire of Arathor is the old empire that was located in the Eastern Kingdoms, and that no longer exists in any real sense. The Arathi Empire is the newer but still ancient empire that is located in an unknown western continent, that by all accounts not only still exists, but is thriving. The Arathi settlement in Hallowfall is very new, probably not even 2 decades old, and it's inhabited by Arathi who came from the Arathi Empire, who are in turn descendants of Arathi who came from the Empire of Arathor. Thoradin's bloodline ruled the Empire of Arathor and were important nobles even after the empire split. The last known member of this bloodline in the Eastern Kingdoms was Faerin Lothar, a great warrior from the Kingdom of Stormwind, and who played an important role in both the First and Second Wars. Known as the Lion of Stormwind, Lothar led the armies of the Alliance during the Second War, and he died fighting Ogrim Doomhammer, war chief of the Horde. Lothar's death inspired the Alliance to fight even harder, helping to end the Second War and ensure the Alliance victory against the Horde. As a young man, Lothar was good friends with King Lane Rin, Anduin Rin's grandfather, and Medivh, the mage who opened the Dark Portal in the first place. Anduin Rin is, of course, named after Anduin Lothar. Lothar was also a mentor to Turalyon, who fought alongside him in the Second War and took up his shield after he fell. Lothar is sometimes known as the last of the Arathi, as he pretty much represented the last remains of the Empire of Arathor, and in fact even used the oath that had once been made to his ancestor to help convince the High Elves of Quathalas to send aid during the Second War. But there is actually at least one other Arathi from the Old Empire, and I don't mean the Trollbanes of Stromgarde, though I'll get to them soon. I mean Merrill Fellstorm. I've pointed this out before, and I'm probably going to pretty much keep bringing it up every time the Arathi are mentioned, but the undead mage Merrill Fellstorm was an Arathi in life. In fact, he was a member of the 100 humans who were first taught magic by the elves that I mentioned before. While we haven't seen him directly interact with the Arathi of Hallowfall yet, he did make the journey with us to Khazar-Gar, but since he is a mage, he's mostly stayed near the site of the fallen Dalaran. Merrill is obviously really old. Once known as Merrill Winterstorm in life, he was one of the founding members of the Council of Tirisfal. He became undead through his own magic long before the Scourge, which may be why he's so remarkably well preserved. Still, undead brains are often known to become affected by rot sooner or later. Merrill also mentored Medan, who may or may not even exist canonically, and a reality anomaly like that by itself could have an effect on anyone's mind. So it's possible Merrill doesn't even remember he was once an Arathi. Even so, it's hard to imagine his presence in this expansion is an accident. Hopefully we'll see more from him soon. As I said, Thoradin's bloodline ruled the Empire of Arathor, but Stromgarde is considered to be all that's left of that empire, as it is the location of the Empire's former capital of Strom. However, pretty much since the Empire fragmented, Stromgarde has been ruled by the Trollbane family. Stromgarde played an important role in the First and Second Wars under the leadership of King Thoras Trollbane, a strong and much admired leader by all accounts. Thoras was eventually murdered when his own son, Galen Trollbane, decided on taking the most straightforward route to promotion. Unlike his father, Galen wasn't a good leader and pretty much lost Stromgarde to hostile forces almost immediately. He was eventually killed by Horde players, and around the time of the Cataclysm, raised by the Forsaken, along with many of his citizens. While at first it seemed like he had pledged loyalty to Sylvanas, by the time of Legion he was declaring Stromgarde, now inhabited by his undead followers, to be independent of both the Alliance and the Horde. Once again, it didn't last long. Galen made a promise to the Death Knights of the Ebon Blade that he tried to go back on, and that went about as well as you might expect. The Death Knights killed him and also raised Thoras Trollbane to become one of their new 4 horsemen, a position he holds to this day. Daneth Trollbane is Thoras Trollbane's nephew and Galen's cousin. He was one of the Sons of Lothar, a group of alliance that included Turalyon, Alleria, Khadgar, and others who journeyed through the Dark Portal many years ago. Though Daneth remained in Outland for a long time, he spoke about one day hoping to restore Stromgarde to its former glory, and during Battle for Azeroth, he returned to rule the city, successfully defending it from the Horde during the Battle for Stromgarde. More recently, Daneth joined the Alliance forces that have journeyed to Khazar-Gar, leaving Stromgarde in the hands of his niece, Maren Trollbane. As you can imagine from its turbulent past, Stromgarde isn't exactly a land of milk and honey. The people very much struggle with bread and butter issues like, well, making sure everyone has bread and butter. The city has been facing hardship. Meanwhile, the Arathi Highlands still has a strong Horde presence. After the armistice between the Alliance and Horde, the Magar Orc clans settled in Hammerfall. And while everyone else seems focused on big picture problems like the journey to Shadowlands and the war with Xalatath, and despite the official peace, resentment in Stromgarde has been bubbling over into conflict. When Jaina visited Stromgarde to request more forces to help with the war effort against Xalatath, she found Marin absolutely unimpressed with the request.
I know you've seen a lot of war, Lord Admiral. I know how long you've ruled Kultiras. She rifled through the pages on her desk until she found the one she sought. But do you know how many bushels of grain your kingdom needs for the winter? She held up another parchment. How many horses plow the fields of Stormsong Valley? Another scrap of paper. The cost per hundredweight of iron ore? She shook her head. For years, Stromgarde has lost too many battles and cared too little for its people.
Later, it's very clear that Marin has found a form of solace in nostalgia. Stories of the past, particularly of the ancient empire, seem to drive her, and she even directly refers to Stromgarde as Arathor.
Marin stopped and held her torch aloft. "We walk in Arathor," she said. "This is all that remains of that ancient place, the last echo of an old world. A fitting place for us to speak freely." Jaina nodded. "I grew up learning the legend, how Thoradin saw the vision of his father, clad in the pelt of a black wolf, and how he founded the first kingdom of humans." But Marin shook her head. "Not legend, history. One that I have been trusted to uplift and enrich through my own contributions. One that must not be forgotten."
Marin was found to be pretty much ignoring Alliance orders and inciting conflict with the Magyar, and after learning this, Daneth Trollbane returned to the Arathi Highlands just long enough to relieve her of her duties and have her arrested for good measure. Marin remained both defiant and big on the whole Arathor thing.
"This isn't over," Marin hissed through clenched teeth, snapping Jaina's attention away from the others. "I follow the will of the people, so long as the blood of Arathor runs in my veins."
There are also plenty humans on Azeroth who are unhappy, not only with Horde races like the Orcs and the Undead, but with some of the other Alliance races as well, such as the Dwarves and the Gnomes. So while the Empire of Arathor is long since gone, the memory of Arathor has become a bit of a rallying point for a certain pro-human, anti-everyone else sentiments in the modern Alliance as well. As I said, one of Marin's sore points was the Magyar clans, who, under the leadership of Overlord Goyara, have been allowed to settle in Hammerfall. The Magyar orcs are from alternate Draenor. You may remember that Goyara is, in a way, alternate Draenor's Thrall, in that she is the child of that reality's Durotan and Draka. Thrall and Goyara seem to deal with this by generally treating each other like siblings, and it's probably easiest to think of Goyara as Thrall's sister. Goyara and the Magyar were forced to flee alternate Draenor after the Draenor of that world became fanatical under the light and began to spread its influence by force. So they, more than anyone else, has seen the, well, dark side of the light isn't correct, but they've seen what happens when the light gets so strong it burns everything it touches and shines so bright it's blinding. Hammerfall also has a bit of a history with being the destination for people who feel like they have no place anywhere else, and that reputation still holds, not just because of the Magyar. Several undead former citizens of Stromgarde, who are not ready to leave their ancestral lands, can also be found there. Like Thoris Trollbane and Meryl Fellstorm, it's kind of funny that while all these living humans wax eloquent about their ancestral land, actual undead ancestors who arguably have more of a claim to that land are walking around. But of course, while all this nostalgia that's slightly complicated by things like the living undead is one thing, the whole Arathi situation is further complicated by the existence of a living, breathing Arathi Empire. So as I said, the Arathi Empire was established likely thousands of years ago from humans from the Empire of Arathor and elves from Quel'Thalas. These days, many Arathi have pointed ears, revealing this part of their ancestry. But if you ask them about it directly, they make it clear that they don't identify as Elven. Why would you? The ears. Legend says that when the Arathi first settled at our home, we were two peoples, humans and the High Elves who joined them to help teach magic. They built the foundations of the Arathi Empire together and became one. We have remained united ever since. I am not an elf. I am an Arathi. Considering the anti-non-human sentiment we've been seeing in Stromgarde, it's possible that Marin's followers would have a problem with the people of the Arathi Empire. But it seems a certain passing resemblance to High Elves can be forgiven when you otherwise represent a glorious human past. It's probably also worth pointing out that, due to their ancestry, there's a strong chance the people from the Arathi Empire live longer than most humans. Think the Men of Numenor from Lord of the Rings. So these Arathi not only represent an ancient, glorious past for the humans of Azeroth, they're also pretty glorious now. It'd be like finding out Atlantis exists and is inhabited by Romans who are even more impressive than our stories about Julius Caesar. You can imagine how exciting and cool that would be, but also how it could excite some of the worst people in the world as well. Especially if these Romans turned out to be every bit as regressive in their thinking as, well, Julius Caesar would have been. Because, and I've gone into this quite a bit before, there's a lot about the Arathi Empire to be concerned about. And again, we have never visited the Arathi Empire. It's located somewhere to the west, across the storming sea. But we have met Arathi from the Empire, in Hallowfall, and we've learnt a lot about their home from them. Like the Lightbound of alternate Draenor, the Arathi Empire is extremely devoted to the light. And I don't use that comparison lightly. On Azeroth, we have a mostly comfortable history with the light. Our experience with it tends to be positive, especially for the Alliance. The light has assisted in conflicts with the Legion. It's been a help against the Scourge. It's even allied with the Titans against the Old Gods. While we have dealt with some of its more fanatical followers, such as the Scarlet Crusade, we have also seen the light's more open-minded side. For example, in Legion, Netherlight Temple even accepted Shadow Priests into their ranks, something that would have once been considered beyond heretical. But Legion was also the first time we really felt something was slightly off, at least with the Naru Zira, when she tried to force Illidan to accept the light against his will.
The light will heal your scars.
I am my scars!
As the Magar know, sometimes followers of the light can get just a bit too enthusiastic about spreading the good news, to the point where they've forgotten about little things like consent. And as we know from the dealings with the Scarlet Crusade, sometimes followers of the light can become so blinded, presumably from the brightness of it all, they can lose the ability to see the difference between, for example, Undead Scourge and Emancipated Forsaken. From what we know about the Arathi Empire, they tend to be a bit like that. In a conversation Anduin had with the Arathi Faerin Lothar, she told him directly that the Arathi aren't usually as accepting as we found them. The Arathi of Hallowfall are used to difficult circumstances and know how to accept help where they can find it, but the Arathi Empire would likely be a different story. To be honest, I'm not sure how kindly the mainland would take to the variety of people you keep company with, particularly you, for embracing the darkness as you have. We in Hallowfall know beggars can't be choosers. We need all the help we can get. And you all have proven to be fine folk, but the Empire is not so open-minded or so desperate. The Arathi Empire also sounds like it's really powerful. I mean, it's a whole empire, and not just in name. During the Nightfall event, we learned that the Arathi Empire was once surrounded by enemies and engaged in nearly constant conflict, yet the Empire's flame still burns strong. The Arathi's devotion to the light also translates to a devotion to their emperors, who enjoy both the gift of prophecy and the divine right of kings. The Arathi Empire, since its inception, has thrived under the sacred flame's prophetic guidance. Our emperor, interpreting these divine visions, commands us to fulfill or forestall events of the prophecy. Thus, our empire has flourished. The current Arathi emperor is Thoradin IX, and that name says it all, doesn't it? The Arathi Empire clearly still views the Thoradin name with as much reverence as modern Stromgarde residents longing for an Empire of Arathor do. It was Thoradin IX's vision that sent the Arathi to Hallowfall, a vision that predicted finding Beledar and a final battle between the light and the darkness.
We followed our Emperor's sacred vision across the sea. To fight in Renalash, the final battle between light and dark.
The Emperor's vision. A prophecy of light, battle, and victory. For the Arathi and the Sacred Flame.
Though we'd never heard of the name before Hallowfall, Renalash is a prophecy we're familiar with as well. In the short story Velen, Prophet's Lesson, Velen has a vision of Anduin leading an army of light against the darkness. We see the same future in the comic Son of the Wolf. Based on the images, by the time the final battle comes to pass, Anduin will be a much, much older man. Or he's in store for a magical accident, like the one that prematurely aged Khadgar. Either's possible. The thing is, Velen's prophecy didn't necessarily foresee a victory. It ends like this. And then a shadow fell. It was vast and empty and swallowed all light that entered it. Velen knew it would be all-consuming until, at last, it would turn and devour itself, endlessly gnawing on nothing in the great dark beyond, removing all meaning from the universe, from the most heartbreaking sonata to the most arresting sunset. It was too terrible to see, to comprehend, and yet the army headed straight for it, and the light began to fade. And while the Arathi Emperor foresaw victory for the Arathi and the Sacred Flame, a book in Hallowfall reveals he didn't necessarily see survival for the Arathi that we know. Now we face the unknown Third Tribulation. Will it be the Harbinger's final onslaught of Renalash? Our faith remains steadfast. We are the Emperor's resilient children, yet the future looms ominously. What fate befalls our sacred star, and can we endure this ordeal? We cannot leave, lest the shadow consume Beladar. We cannot send for help, for the journey home is too perilous. Our only choice is to defend our new home and our star from the shadows that would devour us. Sacred Flame grant us strength. The Emperor never foresaw our survival. And here is the biggest difference between a prophet leader like Velen and Thoradin IX. Velen stands next to Anduin, ready to face the darkness together, but the Arathi Emperor stayed behind in his empire and sent his people to face the darkness without him. In World of Warcraft, where we're so used to leaders who fight alongside their people, even dying for their sake if necessary, this absence can't help but feel distasteful. There's also some evidence that Thoradin IX will have reason to conflict with our new friend, Anduin's new very best friend, Faerin Lothar. Faerin Lothar is one of the first Arathi we get to know in Hallowfall, after we arrived with Anduin Wrynn. But she wasn't actually even supposed to be there. Faerin was a child when the Hallowfall expedition left the Arathi Empire, and she snuck aboard one of their ships as a stowaway. She was badly injured, losing both an arm and an eye in the storm that took them to Hallowfall, but she also managed to save the Arathi's Sacred Flame, which they brought with them from the Arathi Empire.
So many died as the Armada crashed into the cliffs. We thought the eternal flame of Arathor snuffed out that day. Then, as we labored to rescue this stowaway child, Faerin, we discovered that she had preserved embers of the flame, at risk to her own life. Brave fool. Yet I'm eternally grateful that she held on to that symbol of hope. Don't tell her I said that.
Faerin is a striking character, and not just because she has a flaming shield as an arm. The name Lothar obviously carries a massive amount of weight among the Alliance, and presumably Faerin is named Lothar because, like Anduin Lothar, she's also a distant descendant from Thoradin's bloodline.
Did I hear that right earlier? You're, Lothar?
You know the name?
Know it. I was named for Anduin Lothar, one of Stormwind's greatest heroes. He was close friends with my grandfather, King Lane Wrynn. Few names hold higher esteem. You must be a lady, or...
Oh no, don't you start using formalities on me. My family is noble, but it's been long since we've seen great fortune. To think I had relatives in the old world. Wonderful. I hope I can live up to such legends.
Faerin made it clear that, while the name Lothar is still a noble one in the Arathi Empire, it's been a long time since her family saw any great fortune. They sound like a minor house at best. However, Faerin's recent short story also talks about her ancestor, Krashai of the First Flame, a queen from Thoradin's bloodline, but who has been forgotten.
Siegfried cleared his throat a bit theatrically, then began to read. The Ballad of Crochet the First Flame. Tale of the Lost Queen of Arathor. According to legend, Crochet was a daughter of kings, descended from the line of Thoradin. She was your ancestor, Siegfried exclaimed with a wave toward Faerin. She all but gasped aloud. I've never heard of her. Few have, her caretaker continued. This is but one of many myths about the Lost Queen.
Faerin was told the story of this queen under mysterious circumstances. Her unofficial guardian, Siegfried, read her the tale from a very strange-sounding book.
The old man opened the book and traced the vine detail framing the page. A gentle golden glow bled outward from the ink, enveloping the tome and flipping the pages in succession until they settled somewhere deep in the text. Whoa! Faerin exclaimed, eyes now wide and wonder-filled. She'd never seen the book do that before. You know magic? I'm afraid not, Siegfried chuckled, then bowed his head and whispered conspiratorially. But the book does. Faerin settled further into her spot, enraptured. This story, Siegfried began while patting the open page, is a special one. Hidden amidst all the fighting and all the battles, nearly forgotten due to the oath that was sworn by the secret keepers, guardians of our most secrety secrets. 8-year-old Faerin hung on every silly word. But then, that was the magic of storytelling.
Despite searching for it, Faerin was never able to discover the story again. It's presented as an unreliable memory colored by the magic of childhood. But it also sounds a little bit like Siegfried could have been one of those secret keepers, guardians of the most secrety secrets, which included the secret of this particular ancestor. I mean, the fact that her name is Lothar, that the Emperor is named Thoradin, and that Thoradin's bloodline is recognized to be the blood of kings in the Arathi Empire, does all leave me a little bit confused about what the big secret would be, or why it's important no one knows about her ancestor. But Faerin also shows signs of that same special connection to the light that the Arathi emperors were always supposed to show. Apart from saving the sacred flame, Faerin's connection to the light has impressed even the Arathi around her.
Meredith continued before she lost her nerve or could be interrupted. Your faith and zeal are unparalleled, to the point where some might even call it foolhardy. But it is clear that whatever force guides you does so because you are worthy. You have been since the beginning, when the shadow first found us. And while I cannot trust in unknown entities, I can trust you. It was you who kindled the sacred flame in me, after I spent years cowering in the darkness. If something spurs you on, I've no doubt it's the right path.
Here, Meredith is referring to the first time Belladar went dark, covering Hallowfall in shadow. After recalling her ancestors' connection to the light, Faerin also managed to summon the sacred flame, even in the darkness.
Faerin's mind raced as her heart wailed in her ears. There was no one else here. If the monsters had breached this far into Merildar, the soldiers would be busy fighting. There was no one else she could call. And Belladar's light no longer shone bright enough to shield them from the perils in the dark. Nothing. No one. I'm here! Something inside Faerin protested angrily. She had promised Molly and the others she would look after them. Had insisted that the sacred flame would always show up for those who needed it most, like it did for the heroes in their stories. Like Crochet had shown up for her people, in the midst of war, in the midst of carnage. As long as there is someone to carry it forward, a torch will always burn in the night. She blinked her eyes open, and shock lodged itself in her throat. A dome of radiance shimmered around both her and Molly. The source, her raised palm, now glowing gold. The Nerubian beat against the shield uselessly, but the light prevented the attack from landing. Standing over the body, braced against the other end of the spear, was the paladin who had come crashing through the window. His panted breaths rattled from behind his faceplate, his gaze fixed on Faerin. There was confusion in those eyes as he took in the scene. Then slow understanding dawned, followed by the first of many impressed looks she would receive over the coming years. "You're doing that on your own?" he said, his voice low and pained. "Incredible," the paladin said before a chorus of shouts drew his attention. He turned, hefting his weapon, only for his entire body to sag with relief.
As I said, Faerin has a remarkable relationship with the light, even for an Arathi. I suspect she's going to turn out to have a claim to the Arathi throne, which will bring her into conflict with the Emperor. She's especially gifted at kindling the light in the darkness, and it was through her help that Anduin was finally able to connect with the light again. Unsurprisingly, the two have formed quite a bond. If they get married, Anduin could take her name and become Anduin Lothar, which would be great, just in case all this stuff with the Arathi wasn't confusing enough. Either way, Faerin has decided she wants to leave Hallowfall and has accepted Anduin's invitation to visit the old world. Her first destination? The original Empire of Arathor, or at least Stromgarde, where she's been invited to visit alongside Daneth Trollbane. With Marin safely locked up, the presence of an original bona fide Arathi from the line of Thoradin himself shouldn't cause too much trouble there, right? I was going to go a bit more into the Legacy of Arathor story and my takeaways from it, but I've really been going on far too long now, so that will have to wait for another time. Either way, I hope this video helped bring you up to speed with the lore you needed to know for this patch. If you enjoyed this video, you can always like, subscribe, comment, share, sign up for notifications so you never miss another video, all that good YouTube stuff. You can also join me in thanking my Patreons who are helping to keep this channel alive. Finally, you can occasionally find me on Twitch, where I'm always happy to talk about all things lore. So while that's all for now, hopefully I'll see you again soon.